Welcome to another conversation with Griff. And thanks to our subscribers on YouTube and audio where you get your podcast. Don't forget, like, share with your friends, and leave a comment. Today, our special guest is Canadian broadcast legend Hazel Mae, who has graciously joined us during the busy holiday season. And we go way back. And we're going to talk about that history. But first of all, Hazel was recently named 2025 Jack Graney Award winner, presented to a member of the media who has made significant contributions to baseball in Canada through their life's work. And that describes you, Hazel. What were your thoughts when you heard that you would receive the award?
Thanks, Griff. I can't wait till we start talking about our history together. First of all, as you know, my, Canadian Hall of Fame history is their host, the MC. So I never thought about, ever getting any type of award, especially the Jack Graney, only because over the years I've helped induct a lot of Jack Graney Award winners, people that I've always admired, people whose work that I have long read or watched them on television. I mean, to think that I would even be worthy of being in that same group is kind of, mind-boggling. And it was interesting. You and I know Scott Crawford at the Baseball Hall of Fame, and he sent me an email telling me, Hazel, I really need to talk to you. And I thought, well, it's odd. Usually if Scott needs anything, Griff, he'll just say it in the email. And I looked at the email and I thought, I got to run some errands. I'll get to it when I can. I didn't that day. On, the next day, he reached out again, this time via text. Listen, I really need to talk to you this weekend. And I thought to myself, geez, it's a weekend. Can it not wait? And so after I went to the grocery store, I reached out to Scott and I said, is everything okay? Is something wrong? And he said, no. And he told me, I'm pleased to tell you that you're the winner of the Jack Graney Award. And I think I said, shut up. I was like, what? And I kept saying, really? And he said, yes. And it still hasn't sunk in because, all the past Jack Graney Award winners are people that I've kind of idolized. And again, it's still really difficult for me to wrap my head around. But as my husband said to me, listen, if someone is willing and want to give you an award, just accept it, be gracious about it, and, just be really excited about it. And I really am.
Yeah, my first thought when I heard was that you'll be the first person to present the award to themselves.
To myself.
and you and Rod Black have done such a great job at the Hall of Fame every June. It's just great seeing you there and seeing the appreciation that you have for baseball in Canada. And obviously that's part of the award and much deserving, very deserving.
Thank you. Thank you, Griff. Coming from you means a lot.
Before we start into the conversation, I want to ask about your Kansas City Chiefs. I see you're wearing their logo. And they were eliminated recently for the first time in the Patrick Mahomes era. First of all, how did you get connected to being a Chiefs fan? And second of all, does that automatically make you a Swiftie?
Okay, so for people who know me, I have been a Chiefs fan since like the late 90s. And that's because I was a big, Joe Montana fan. And when he was with the Niners, I loved watching him play. Then he went to Kansas City, and after he kind of retired, I just stuck with Kansas City. And it's interesting when people say, how's a girl from Toronto be a Kansas City fan? But really, that's how it worked out. And I've been through, so many head coaches, Gunther Cunningham and Dick Vermeil. I mean, I've been through so many quarterbacks as far as, there were a lot of lean years, as you well know, Griff, a lot of lean years where the Chiefs didn't have a defense. Then there were years where they didn't have a really good quarterback. And I really thought that Alex Smith was the guy. As it turned out, it was Patrick Mahomes. But my love for the Chiefs really is thanks in large part to Joe Montana. And I just really enjoyed watching them. And to me, having grown up in, Southern Ontario, 1B would probably be the Buffalo Bills because we're so lucky to see a lot of their games. But for the most part, that's how I became a Chiefs fan. And so I like to wear my Chiefs gear while I'm going through airport security. And over the last couple of years, all of a sudden, the security guy, okay, thank you, Kevin Barker, the security guy at the security place says, "Are you a Swiftie?" when he saw me wear my Chiefs gear. And I just thought to myself, well, hang on a second. Why did you ask me, how I became or why I'm a Chiefs fan? It was automatically, oh, you must be a Swiftie. So I wasn't sure if I should be offended by that. But the fact that Taylor Swift has, brought a lot more attention to my beloved Chiefs is a good thing. And yes, I am also a Swiftie. So it's both of my worlds crashing into one. And so I'll be rooting for the Denver Broncos this playoff season.
Here's a little bit of trivia, Hazel. In the 3 years the Blue Jays have been to the World Series, the Chiefs have never been to the Super Bowl. So there you go. You should have known in October that it was over.
I'm sad. Oh, you should have told me that because now I'm torn.
Back to our regular scheduled programming, a little perspective. I first began working in Major League Baseball in the 70s and 80s when covering baseball was a true old boys club.
Yeah.
I saw the struggle for gender equality up close as a PR guy in Montreal. And as women inevitably broke through the glass ceiling, I have been proud of the accomplishments, and that includes you. But there's a list, and I see it. I see it every time that there's a sorority of women broadcasters, and it's very quiet, but if you're paying attention, you can see it. There's no secret handshake or anything, but there's a respect and there's sort of a closeness. And I have a list here, and you can add to it or you can comment on any on this list. But through the years, Susan Waldman, Hannah Storm, Nancy Newman, Erin Andrews, Meredith Barakovich, Melanie Newman, Jennifer Hedger, Martine Gaillard, Michelle Tafoya, Rachel Nichols, Gary Hargrave, and Teresa Cruz. I mean, that's been a long list that is growing all the time. And
yes,
I can be very proud of being a part of that.
Thank you. And I want to add Catherine Humphreys. Growing up in Toronto, Catherine Humphreys and Teresa Hergert Cruz, I guess now, they were two women from Canada that I was like, whoa, this is kind of cool. And this could be an option for those of us that want to get into this business. But you rhymed off so many unbelievable broadcasters from the US. I mean, big Michelle Tafoya fan because I love football. Hannah Storm. And listen, I know I'm not in the age where I remember Phyllis George, but I know of Phyllis George because she was the first, and correct me if I'm wrong, Griff, I mean, she was the first female to talk about sports in the studio. Was she not? Like, I remember Phyllis George so vividly.
I may have had a crush on her at one point.
She's a beautiful woman. But when I look back at, how far we've come, it's great. Listen, could we improve even more? Absolutely. I'd love to see more female executives in sports. We're seeing a lot more in baseball, but would I like to see, another Kim Ng as someone in charge of the product on the field in Major League Baseball? I'd love to see that. But you're right. There's a lot of us now, and we don't all look the same, which is a blessing, because that means that this industry is opening its arms and minds to people of different backgrounds that want to do what I do.
Is there anyone that's special that as a young broadcaster you were shy about approaching, but it turned out you got some really good advice from that person?
You named her. It was Susan Waldman. It's interesting. When I think it was 2015, maybe 2013, 2014, 2015, around there, when I started covering baseball on a full-time basis. The Yankees were in town, and I remember knowing of Susan, but never having the courage to introduce myself. And she happened to be on the field at Rogers Center, standing next to John Sterling, as you know, another legend.
I love John.
Oh, so I thought, you know what, just go and introduce yourself. And, got nothing to lose. They might look at you and go, who the heck are you? But she could not have been more open to, asking me about myself. And John asked me, what I did before, and they were genuinely interested. And then, this is great, then they asked me if I was free for dinner. The three of us go. Unfortunately, I had plans, but I thought, wow, they don't know me from Adam. And it turned out to, hey, we're going to High's Steakhouse later tonight. Do you want to join us? A, unfortunately, I couldn't, but B, I'm not sure I had the funds for High's Steakhouse, Griff, if you know what I mean.
Oh, absolutely.
But that was, to me, such a huge moment, because not that I felt accepted, I just felt included, and I felt that they felt that I was a colleague of theirs. And to feel that you're a colleague to John Sterling and Susan Waldman, of all people, my gosh, that was such a huge thing for me.
Yeah, a personal story about Susan Waldman. When I came over from the National League to the American League, and she was with the Yankees, obviously, when she was hosting the Fan New York sports talk show late at night, my son Matthew, in his bedroom in Montreal, would listen every night to Susan Waldman. So I told her this. The first time I saw her at Rogers Center or Skydome, whatever it was. And the next day, she brought a picture, autograph to Matt. Thanks for your support.
Aww.
I didn't even ask, and she just did that. And to this day, 30 years later, Matthew still has that picture. So that's just an example of Susan and her thoughtfulness,
And I think the one piece of advice, and I had spoken to her actually quite recently, and I said, she said, is everything okay? You seem a little off. And I was telling her I was struggling with a particular situation. And she said to me, I see how hard you work. You need to know that whether you're doubting yourself in any particular situation, that there are people that can see that you're working hard, you're trying. She said you should never, I forgot her exact wording. She said you should never doubt yourself, because if you're trying and you're putting the work in, not only will other people see it, the right people will see it. And you should never, it wasn't one of these, don't ever give up kind of things. Right. But it was a reminder that even though I've been doing this for a few years, there will always be times, moments where I doubt myself, whether I doubted doing something right or what I thought was right at the time. And it was just kind of one of her little pep talks that she likes to give me every now and then. So she, to me, is just the best. Anyone who's ever met Susan, she is the best.
100%. One thing that's always bothered me in my 50 plus years in Major League Baseball, it's just a personal observation, and it really grinds me, is why is it that I, in PR or media, could share a quiet moment, go for a drink or a bite to eat after a game, or even show up at a ballpark in the same cab as a ball player, and nobody says anything. And yet women reporters universally
Oh,
have to
yes.
that fact that what's going on here, nobody asked me what's going on when I show up with Carlos Delgado in a cab, like that's crazy.
I remember, it's interesting you said that. I remember a story. I told this story recently. When I moved to Boston for work, I knew no one. I didn't know what intersection my apartment was in Boston. I always had to look it up because I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know anybody. I didn't know directions. I just knew how to get to Fenway Park. And I remember someone saying, oh, you should go to this particular restaurant, really good food, blah, blah, blah. And this particular restaurant, I sat up at the bar to eat. I'm not a cook. I'm not good. There are takeout menus in my refrigerator. That's the scope of my cooking aficionado. So I was sitting up there, and some athletes happened to be going to that restaurant. Great food, attracts a lot of, people that want to eat good food. And I started having a conversation with a couple of athletes in the area. And then it ended up on one of the gossip columns in the Boston Herald. And it didn't say anything was fishy, but the way the gossip columnists had written it, there was like, well, something was up, She's new in town, she's single. Well, how about the fact that I was just sitting eating my meal, and they came over to say hello because they were just being nice, and we were having a conversation, and I enjoyed the conversation because who wants to sit and eat alone when you don't know anybody, night in and night out. And I really enjoyed it. And it was just one of these things where I thought, if a male counterpart was sitting there by themselves and someone came over to say hello, and for no other reason but just to be nice, and they felt bad because I was sitting by myself. But yeah, I totally get it. And there's a lot of examples I can give a lot.
You know how much that has bothered me through the years with different people.
Yeah, no, you've mentioned it to me a few times. I remember.
Well, one of the things that you didn't have to iterate to me is your enjoyment of eating out, because when we went to Boston and you had been with NESN for 2 years, you said, do you want to go to lunch? And we said, sure. So we headed down to a restaurant on the main drag. And as soon as you walk through the door, the owner's coming out, Hazel.
I know.
I said, oh, Hazel must be going out to eat a lot.
They know I can't cook for a lick anyways. But yeah, I do. Gosh, you remember that? Griff, that's like long time ago. That's like over 20 years ago, right?
Yeah, it'll be in my book. I remember a lot. But you brought it up, but Hazel's self-doubt. This is going to be the theme for the next little bit here.
Yeah.
When you were at York University and then got a job at the Fan, I guess, reception, right? Something like that?
Actually, do you remember CFRB Mix 99.9 FM?
Yes.
So CFRB had a sports. So I don't know how I even got the job. I was a receptionist for CFRB, and the sports director's name was Bill Stevenson, the late Bill Stevenson. And he and I would get into these really great conversations about sports. And he said to me one day as he was leaving for lunch, he said, Hazel, I'm leaving for lunch. If anyone's looking for sports, you can answer the phone. And I said, okay. So it would go like this, Griff. I would pick up the phone. Good afternoon, CFRB, how can I help you? And this was in the time before social media. So, an elderly lady said, oh, could you pass me over to the sports department? And I said, sure, one moment, please. I put them on hold. I'd wait 15 seconds and I'd go, sports, how can I help you? And they would say, can you tell me what happened in the Leaf game? And I would say, oh, such and such scored a couple of goals and they ended up beating the Pittsburgh Penguins, 5-4.
It's a start.
Whatever, right? And so the lady said, okay, thank you very much. And I thought, oh, this is kind of cool. And that's what would happen within that hour that Bill was on lunch is I would tell them to hold, I'd wait. I don't know if I changed my voice, but I do remember going, hold please, and then going, sports, how can I help you? But that really was one of the first real things where I thought to myself, oh, you know what? I'm kind of good at this. I might be able to do this for a living.
So early on in your career of going to ballparks, I remember you coming out and being very quiet, getting voice clips and watching the games. A big fan. I mean, it was clearly you understood the game and it was important that you do a good job there. But even then, with your desk work that you got into at Sportsnet, with your J-Zone work, you were never really 100% sure that you were very good. And it seemed to me you were always unsure, always needed reassurance.
Yeah, I always asked you, right? I always would say, Griff, is this
early trips into the clubhouse and to the ballpark like for a young Hazel Mae?
I remember the very first time I was given a press pass to a game at Rogers Center. I didn't know what to wear. And I remember thinking, I'm not even on television, but I thought to myself, I really need to make a good first impression. So I don't even know how much money I went and just splurged on. And I don't know if you remember seeing me in this. It was a length of almost kind of a mid-length red leather skirt. I remember that so vividly because I got it from Danier Leather, which was like the place to go get anything leather. And I wore like really fancy top, thinking to myself, I just wanted to make a good first impression. Meanwhile, I was doing a radio hit. I don't know what I was thinking. I just wanted to make a good first impression. And I remember Dave Perkins. I remember Steve Milton from the Hamilton Spectre at the time. Oh my gosh. Who else? Larry Milson. I mean, I just remember being in awe of you guys and wanted to feel like I wanted you guys to like me. And I wanted you guys to think that like I was knowledgeable. And I remember always running things by you and Perky. I wanted to say, hey, if I ask this player this question, does that make sense to you? I mean, or I'd say, Griff, if I went this kind of angle on this story, is the player going to think I'm dumb or stupid? Like, I just remember wanting to be, not stick out like a sore thumb, although probably buying a red leather skirt didn't do that trick, but I wanted to feel like one of you guys. And I knew how smart you guys were, how, well-versed you guys were. So I always had that in the back of my mind that I wanted to be perfect. Like I couldn't be okay. I couldn't be very good. I had to be perfect to feel like I belonged.
It's funny how history continues to repeat itself, because when I was PR for the 4 years with the Jays and you were in the end of the dugout, we were always going, what should I ask?
I was texting you and I said, can I ask this question? Because, when you're covering a team night in and night out, you want to keep a really good relationship. You can't always be, how great they are, because sometimes they're not so great. Yeah. And the reason why I always ran it by you is because you being in that clubhouse had a better sense of maybe their personalities or how they would take certain questions. And so you were a really good sounding board for me when it came to, hey, I'd love to ask them this question. Do you think that's kind of offside? Or it's amazing. Like you said, I've been doing this for so long, and you will always have that voice in the back of your head, kind of second guessing whether you did, a good job, or was this the right way to go about things?
So here's more Hazel self-doubt that you'll enjoy. I remember we went to lunch on Front Street, and you had already got an offer from NESN, and you were contemplating whether I should go or whether I shouldn't go. And you're comfortable, and you're not sure how you would do in a huge baseball market like Boston, New England. And then a month later, and then I encouraged that if you don't do it, you'll regret it. Maybe not now. I felt like Humphrey Bogart. Maybe not now. Maybe not tomorrow, but for the rest of your life. And a month later at the All-Star game in Houston, I watched at the Monday night party as Red Sox owner John Henry came up to you, and I could see he was smitten already, that he wanted you to be part of the Red Sox broadcast team. And I said, Hazel's got this, because that's the owner of the team, you know?
It was so cool because, and you and I have talked about this over the years. Do you remember Tom Werner, who's the chairman of the Boston Red Sox? He was the one who was instrumental. And for anyone watching this who familiar with Tom Werner, he is the executive producer. He created The Cosby Show and Roseanne and Third Rock from the Sun. I mean, he's this big Hollywood executive, but he was also a key decision maker with the Boston Red Sox. He was the one who saw my demo tape and got me to fly to Boston to quote unquote audition, which I found out afterwards. That was just his way of making sure he went through the proper channels. But in his mind, he really wanted me to take the job. And because you've been around the block and you knew a lot of, baseball markets, and I just wasn't sure, because I had a player tell me when I told them, listen, I might take this job at Boston, that, this probably wasn't the right place for someone that looked like me.
It's not just someone that looks like you. To me, it's if you're not from New England, they don't want to hear from you.
Listen, and I'm from Canada. They're thinking, what? Okay, you're hiring someone who's not even from New England. She doesn't look like any of the sportscasters we have in Boston, and she's from Canada. So you can understand where I was already, I had like 2 strikes against me before, I got there. So that's why I thought, if I make it in Boston, I mean, maybe this should have been in New York, but if I can make it there, I can make it anywhere. I mean, Boston, the Red Sox were the last team to integrate.
1959, Pumpsy Green.
Absolutely, to have, an African-American on the team. And so this is 2004. I mean,
it
was time. It was time.
But Tom Werner, he got Roseanne to sing the anthem in San Diego when he hired Hazel Mae for NESN. So he's 1 for 2.
1 out of 2 ain't bad.
So at NESN, you became a star, not immediately, but over time. And I know that from talking to people in the market in the area. And then you made another tough decision to go to a fledgling MLB network in New York. And that is even a bigger decision. And what struck me and made me laugh is that you were a reverse commuter. You lived in Manhattan and worked in Secaucus, New Jersey, which isn't really the way that it usually is.
No, I had no idea, right? I just thought, oh, well, if I'm going to, work in New York, I want to live in Manhattan. The funny thing about that job is, and I don't know if I've said this, I think I have said, I was actually MLB Network's employee number 1. That's kind of like, I was the Paul Beeston of MLB Network. I was the first employee. I remember Tony Petitti, who was the number 2 guy from CBS. He was then the president of MLB Network. And he was such a visionary. And I tell you this because he calls my agent and said, Tom Werner is on the board of governors for MLB Network. And he had mentioned that, Hazel did a really good job and maybe she would be someone who could help this startup. And so my agent and I flew to New York. He takes us to Secaucus. I've never even heard of Secaucus. He takes us to Secaucus and meets us outside of this old abandoned MSNBC studio. And I remember looking over at Sue, my agent at the time, and I said, where are we? And she said, I don't know. This is the place he wanted us to meet him. So a very nice woman opens the door. We walk in, and it's literally old computer, desktop computers, because it used to be where the MSNBC news was shot with all these, newsroom people in the background. And I thought to myself, I'm not sure why we're here. So Tony Petitti comes down and he brings us to this area. And he said, I've got this idea. It's a 24-hour baseball station. And where we're standing now, I'm going to gut it. And I'm going to put an artificial baseball field inside where analysts will break down plays and stuff. And the first thing I thought, Griff, was this will never work. This will never fly. I've never heard anyone wanting a 24-hour baseball station. I'm like, why would I leave NESN to come to this? But he was so convincing. And he was talking about the kind of programming he had envisioned for MLB Network. And he wanted me to be, part of it, part of the launch, which I thought, man, this is kind of risky, because I was in pretty good with the Red Sox and at NESN, and I was really happy in Boston. But then it was this excitement of starting something new from the ground up. And so I did it. I went from Boston to New York. I was there in the fall of 2008, but we didn't broadcast until New Year's Day 2009. So it was a really neat experience to be part of MLB Network from the beginning.
At a certain point during that first meeting, was your agent Sue moonwalking towards the exit?
I don't know, but she did have the same kind of doubts. But she said to me, listen, he is, one under the executive that was under Sean McManus, who is, as you know, the grand poobah of CBS. And so she said, he can't be like Looney Tunes or off his rocker. He's got this plan. He's got this vision. It's totally up to you. And I thought, you know what, let's do it. Let's do it.
So as the MLB Network's first employee, the Paul Beeston of MLB Network, did you wear socks?
I know where you're getting at.
But who was some of the other original talent at the network?
Okay, so I was number one. Matt Vesgersian, I believe, was number 3, and Harold Reynolds was number 2. So it was the 3 of us, and then Victor Rojas was there right from the get-go. Dan Plesac was there right from the get-go. And it was really interesting because we had no idea if this thing was going to fly. Who is going to want to watch baseball 24/7 and what kind of programming? But now, when I look at it, it's just so cool to have looked back at that part of my career. And I'm really grateful for the things that I've learned, things that I was able to cover. I mean, I was the first host of Quick Pitch. I was the first host of The Rundown. I did 30 clubs in 30 days when it was literally 30 clubs in 30 days. I worked every day for a month. And I thought to myself, what am I doing? Now I watch it and they're like 30 clubs in 30 days, but it's a
broken into
15-minute intervals. Exactly.
It's not really 30 clubs.
I'm like, come on. Do it the right way. 30 clubs in 30 days.
So then you came back to, that's a big decision, to come back to Canada, to come back to Sportsnet. But to me, when you start back with that sort of magnified role with Buck, and I think Dan was there already, in 2015 to 2025, you are fresh for an entire new generation of Blue Jays fans. You're part of what they remember about 6 trips to the postseason in 10 years. You're part of their baseball experience. Do you feel a difference between the first time and this time? And who, like Buck, and it seems like Buck and Dan and others are a pleasure for you to work with.
Oh my gosh. I mean, getting back to the Jack Graney, there is no Jack Graney without Dan Shulman and Buck Martinez and Joe Siddle and the guys, Doug Walton and Troy Clare and the rest of the guys in the truck crew, because I think, baseball is it's an awesome sport to cover, but no two games are ever alike. So you are always learning. You always have to improve. And people who love baseball, there's a lot of them that are just diehards. And you need to almost maybe, unfairly have to live up to a certain standard. And when you're part of a broadcast crew with Buck Martinez and Dan Shulman, think of the pressure, the kind of stress for me, because I don't want to be kind of the weak link. I don't want to be like the squeaky wheel in this broadcast. We have one of the best, if not one of the best broadcasts in all of Major League Baseball. Well, so the fact that, Dan and Buck were open to, having me part of the broadcast, willing to, kind of steer me in the right direction when they thought, maybe that's not the angle for that story. I mean, they take time to really kind of help me. And a lot of my improvement is also observing them. And, you see Dan and Buck, who have been doing this for decades at the highest level. And they are still, to me, the hardest working people in Major League Baseball. Like, Buck is constantly taking notes, showing up at spring training when he's not really expected or scheduled to be there. He comes there early. You know that. Mm-hmm. Dan does the same thing. Dan is working college hoops and then comes down to spring training. I mean, these guys, I watch them. I'm so fortunate and so lucky. And they drive me and motivate me to work just as hard, if not harder, to make our broadcast the way it is today.
Well, Hazel, I'm an observer in the clubhouse, in the press box, on the field. And one thing I have noticed about your impact is that certain players have changed because of your relationship with them. And I just want you to talk a little bit about Rowdy Tellez and how Rowdy was tough to deal with for media. He had an issue with his mom and like you broke through, and all of a sudden for everyone, he became like a charming guy that you wanted to talk to.
I think for me, the biggest thing with, building foundation or trying to kind of develop a really good relationship with a player is to find some type of common ground. And it may not even have to do with baseball. It could be, with Rowdy, I think, my maternal instincts, I don't know if you want to call it that, kind of kicked in when I would have conversations with him off camera.
Right.
And this, a lot of times when you see players, and I tell, future broadcasters this, when you see a player, don't always go over and talk to them when you need something from them. Sometimes it's okay to go up to a player, say hello, hey, did you do anything exciting on your off day, and then walk away. And it's not so for them, the player, as soon as they see you, you've got a mic in your hand, the camera guy with a camera on his shoulder, and he's like aiming for you. Sometimes I've got to put myself in their shoes, and that could be a little bit intimidating. And it's also one of these, she's only going to come and talk to me when she needs something from me. So for me, I think getting to the crux of having a good personal / working relationship. And when I say personal, in that you kind of get to know the person and not the baseball player, you try to get to the person sometimes before you get to the nuts and bolts. And I think that can kind of lower their guard sometimes.
Yeah, the other one that specifically makes me smile is your first time through when you were working on J Zone. And you told me one time how the worst interview that you had on the field was Carlos Delgado. He would not open up. He would not ask you.
No.
And then I think at that moment you found out that you're not the only one intimidated. The players can be, and you settled that with Carlos and had some really good interviews with him. But did you learn from that moment that you're not the only one who's scared?
I always think, oh my gosh, there's something about me. They don't like me. I said something wrong. They hate my guts.
Remember.
But I don't know. I guess to me, to me, it's like, well, everybody else has such a good relationship with them, and they can talk so, have great conversations.
I remember the time that you were angsting over it.
I remember grinding over it, like over and over. I'm thinking, he hates me. Oh my gosh, I must have asked him a wrong question. And he would just not open up. And to this day, when I see him, he comes over and gives me a hug and says, great to see you. And I just think back, I'm like, oh my gosh, if I knew then that you would be this nice to me now, I wouldn't have fretted over all those times where I thought you just, didn't want to talk to me or have anything to do with me.
It's funny when you were talking about Rowdy and how from afar, some people don't want to approach.
No.
Andre Dawson was like that in Montreal. He looked
really?
He looked tough. He looked like he wasn't friendly, but being the PR guy there, I got to know him as a person. He had a great sense of humor. He loved people, but he just looked intimidating, so nobody would go talk to him. He won Rookie of the Year, and nobody would go talk to him. And so finally, I just told some key writers, "You got to go. This guy's great.
You just gotta go."
He opened up, and like the rest is history. He became a go-to guy for all those people.
It's interesting. You know who was that kind of modern present day guy for me? Troy Tulowitzki.
Oh yeah.
So I was doing one of our interview room segments with him, and I was literally in my stomach. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't really want to do this. He's just going to be very doesn't want to share anything, doesn't want to be candid. And then when I thought the interview was okay. It wasn't great. I thought it was okay. And then when the cameras were off, for some reason, he was, I know. We were talking about Alana Rizzo, who was his sideline reporter when he was with the Rockies. And that was for us kind of the mutual, oh, hey, I know her. And he said, oh, yeah, I know her. And then so we started talking. And I don't know why I brought this up. And I said to him, I always thought you didn't like me because you never really wanted to talk to me. And he said, that's funny you mentioned that, because Alana said the same thing to me. Alana always thought that I didn't like her because I didn't talk to her. The truth of the matter is I have a lot of respect for you and Alana. But to me, I can't put two, okay, you respect us, but you don't really talk to us. So I'm still trying to rectify, what does that mean?
To me, Tulo and Roy Halladay were two peas in a pod in terms of they did not tolerate bad questions.
Yes.
If you were one-on-one and asking good questions, they were fine. But if you were in a group and the first dumb question that came up, they would just shut it down,
Oh my gosh. Who was it? Jose Bautista was like that too.
Yeah, well, Jose, yeah, he was like that. Yeah. He was one of my favorite. He and Carlos Delgado are probably two of my 5 favorite Blue Jays ever. So.
And the two guys I was deathly afraid to talk to.
Yeah. Now, I want to get a little personal here.
Sure.
Kevin Barker, your husband
Yes.
of however many years, he carries the Blair and Barker show. I know that. He has the strong opinions, and Blair just blethers through it. But he doesn't always agree with you. I can't imagine being at home and talking about the same subject.
He's in the other room listening to this. So,
and yeah, that must be an issue at times.
Actually, a lot of times, because, and I've always been very open about this. My job is different than Kevin's job. Kevin played the game. I have never hit a double in the gap in my life. So we have two very kind of different perspectives. And as the sideline on-field reporter for the Blue Jays, part of my job is to help market the team. And that's why you hear Dan Schulman talk about, ticket sales and, bobblehead days. And, part of our job is to help market the team. Now, my husband's job as an analyst is to tell people what he sees and thinks about certain things, having had the lens of playing in the big leagues. And, in its entirety, I think he played 16 years professionally. So a lot of times, at the dinner table or we're talking, I will say to him, I thought you were pretty hard on Vladdy today. And he will come back with, well, blah, 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 blah. Oh, yeah. Well, and then, there'll be other times where I'll say, did you really have to say that about, X player? And then he'll come back with, well, the reason why is X, Y, and Z. And I know how hard it is. Or he'll say, I know, what typically happens in this setting. And I don't think he did, the right thing there. And it is a very spirited conversation. And a lot of times we do disagree because, I can't imagine understanding what it's like to have played in the major leagues. So we often, butt heads about certain players, certain plays, because I look at it through the lens of, as part of the broadcast team, but also as a baseball fan. And so, there are things that I may have disagreed with that I heard or people have told me that he has said on the show. And it just makes for, a more interesting and exciting life at home.
When you came back to Toronto and I heard that you and Kevin were married, all I could think of was Green Acres, the sitcom from the 70s. And the theme song goes through my head all the time when I see them.
Well, you know what? My husband is one of the most, honestly, insightful people when it comes to baseball. Wow. And he's very much like Gibby, John Gibbons, where don't let the accent fool you. There is a lot going on. And a lot of times, just like Gibby, they'll let people assume or perceive certain things. My husband is very sharp and very, very intelligent. And he, a lot of times people get the wrong message because of that accent. So
I looked at a map this morning for Mendota, Virginia.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like a 5-iron away from the Bristol Motor Speedway, which probably has more people on one day than Mendota has.
I think Mendota has a population of honey, is it 2,000? Less than 2,000 people, he said.
So my question is, there must be a story about you going and meeting the parents at
Oh my gosh. Yes, of course there is. Okay, I'll give you this one.
Okay.
My in-laws live 17 miles away from the main road. So I'm going to meet his parents for the very first time in the home he grew up and raised in. And so they're on a farm. And we come off the main highway and we are going into the mountains and we're going up and over. And now it's like we're 15 minutes in from the time we left the main road, the main highway. And I thought to myself, where does this dude live? Like, we are way, way, way away from civilization. And they live in a beautiful little country home. But I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, like, where are we? It literally is in the middle of nowhere. And his sister, who is just lovely, his sister lives in Tennessee. And if you think Kevin's accent can sometimes be hard to decipher, holy smokes, his sister. And I remember being there and just nodding a lot, nodding and smiling. And in my mind thinking, what did she just say? have no idea what these people are saying. I can't understand. They're talking a mile a minute. Their accent is really heavy, a very Southern accent. But yeah, there are a lot of times, and we won't even get to the political differences. We'll leave that be.
Okay,
But yeah, we'll leave that be. But, they're just lovely, wonderful people. And it was definitely a trip.
So now your parents, I remember you sitting in the press box next to me when the press box was behind home plate, and your dad was in the action seats, and you weren't watching the game. You were watching him to make sure he was okay the entire game. What had their reaction been to your career and to you becoming an icon?
You and my mother think that. My parents, as a daughter of immigrants, my parents wanted me to be a doctor and or a lawyer. I played sports throughout my, elementary school, high school life. And my father was always enjoyed all the track meets and the tournaments and all that. But in the back of his mind, sports was not something he thought would be a viable way to make a living. So I wanted to be a tennis player. And I remember thinking to turn pro, you needed a really good coach and blah, blah, blah. And I was telling my dad, we'd need to get a coach and I'd have to have lessons and whatever. And we didn't have a lot of money. And my father was like, this is great as a hobby, but he couldn't really see a life or, sports as a way to, make a good living. And so when I got to the stage of my career where I was on national television in Canada, Dad was so proud, but I don't really I think he still thought, when he was alive, I still think he thought, well, this was a nice little side gig for her because it just wasn't really something that, our family thought was a way, or there was a pathway to make a good living that way. But one quick thing about those in the action seats, when I was working the sidelines, I remember they were sitting there. This was on another occasion, and they were right next to Gibby. And I was over at the camera well, and I kept looking over to check in on them, make sure they were okay. And afterwards, we had a conversation. I said, what did you think of those seats? Weren't they great? John Gibbons was right next to you. You could see everyone. And my mom said, your dad and I appreciate the seats, but it's okay. We don't want to sit there anymore. And I thought to myself, oh, did something happen? Oh my gosh, did they have a bad experience with one of the players? I was thinking to myself, well, why wouldn't you want to sit there? And my mom said, because Dad and I can't see you and can't hear what you're saying. So we prefer to watch you on television, which was a very nice thing. Yeah. But yeah, they're done with not hearing any type of, Hazel Mae.
But at least he had that experience of being right down there next to you.
Yeah, it was. My mom was nodding off a little bit, but all I could think of is, please don't show my parents. My mom's nodding off.
I got two more items here to wrap it up. First is to tell you how much I admire the content that you bring to pregame interviews, post-game, in-game. It's not analytics. It's stuff that your viewers my age and even younger, but watching on television want to hear. They want to hear something personal about players. They want to hear what they're thinking. They don't want constant charts about strike probability and hard contact. And
I know it's part of the game. I absolutely listen.
But the fact that you keep away from that and bring humanity to it is admirable. And I just want to compliment you on that.
Thank you. I know that analytics and metrics and data are a big part of the game these days. So I do try to delve in it a little bit. But what I always tell my producers and some of the statisticians that suggest, hey, maybe this chart or this graph or this particular stat would work with your story, I always tell them, if I don't understand what its meaning is, I don't want to say it. I don't want to just regurgitate, WRC, blah, blah, without knowing what that means and how it relates to what I want to say in my story. So there will be times where I use it, but I want you to know that when I do use it, I'm understanding why I'm using it. And I want to put it in a way where the casual fan can understand it. I never want to say anything that I myself don't understand.
Right.
If you give me, a stat and you say, well, all you have to say is this, da 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 da, and that'll work. But I always tell them, but I don't understand it. If I don't understand this stat that you're giving me, how can I expect people that are watching outside of the diehards, that are watching? How can we be more,
I think
we can bring more people into the game by not isolating them.
I also think most of the diehards are watching on their mobile devices and not on their television. It's like you're appealing to a TV crowd that's baseball first oriented,
Yes.
not stats. They don't have their fantasy leagues operating. They're not concerned about that. They're concerned about the players. They want to love Ernie Clement. They want to know things about these players, and you bring that to them.
Thank you.
The last item before we wrap up, and I appreciate you taking the time for this conversation, especially during a busy holiday season, but I've already established that I'm a keen observer.
Okay. You're making me nervous. Okay.
It's very noticeable being at the ballpark every home game, how much of an effect you have on young girls in the stands and women in general. They want to be Hazel Mae. They want to know what Hazel's thinking. They put you on some sort of a pedestal, and you never disappoint them. But when did you first notice the effect that you were having? And you never turned down a young fan with at least a wave or a hello. When did you learn that lesson that this was so important to what you're doing?
I think there's two things that pop up when you ask me that. When you have young girls and boys, as I think back, I've had conversations with boys as well. When you have these young people that come up to you and their parents, say, oh, such and such, she watches you all the time. She wants to be you. And when I first came on the scene, there were a lot of, Asian and Southeast Asian boys and girls that were coming up to me. And that to me was just, such a privilege. And it was just so heartwarming that someone would want to be like you, that they liked enough of you to somehow want to be like you. But it wasn't until, and I remember this so vividly, I was speaking to someone and I had my back turned to a woman and her daughter. And I remember, I think I signed a quick autograph and I did a photo. And while I was taking a photo, the mother said, Hazel Mae, when you're done, can you turn around and take a photo with my daughter? She looks up to you. She wants to be just like you. And I remember turning around, and her daughter had blonde hair and blue eyes. And I don't know why that struck me, only because that little girl didn't look like me, but she looked at me as someone she could aspire to. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but
makes all the sense in the world.
To me, it's wonderful when I see, an Asian girl or boy look up and they see themselves in me. But then to turn around and see someone who doesn't look anything like me and will never look anything like me, but to still say they want to be like me, that really hit home. I think that was one of those aha moments in your career where you go, wow, I must be doing okay that this young person sees a future doing something that I'm doing.
That's beautiful. A good way to wrap it up, Hazel. Congratulations on the Graney Award, and all the best for the holidays to you and your family. Appreciate your time. And yeah, this is great having you on Conversations with Griff.
Thanks, Griff. You're the best.
All right. Talk to you later.